Hey everyone and welcome back. Today we're tackling plasmoid drones. Honestly, the more I read, the more questions I have.
Well, that's the nature of truly cutting-edge science, isn't it? It raises more questions than it answers, especially when you throw in government pronouncements, public reactions.
You're telling me these plasmoid drones, or whatever they are, have been spotted zipping around over New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
Witnesses are saying they're moving at crazy speeds, like faster than anything we've seen before. Some even claim to have seen them just disappear into thin air. It sounds like something out of the X-Files. But here's the kicker. The FAA initially put out all these warnings about potential safety risks, even hinting at grounding flights. If these sightings continued, everyone was freaking out. But then, out of the blue, the White House released a statement that seemed to completely contradict the FAA, suggesting that these drones might be FAA approved all along.
Certainly a curious turn of events, isn't it? What was initially presented as a potential threat is now being framed as something potentially routine. This raises some very interesting questions about what the FAA knew when they knew it, and why there was this initial alarm followed by a seemingly nonchalant response.
Exactly. So what's the deal? Were these plasmoid drones flying under the radar, so to speak, this whole time? And if so, who's piloting them? To even begin to answer these questions, I think we need to go back to basics. What exactly are plasmoids, and how do they connect to these drone sightings?
There's a 1966 NASA paper on ball lightning that I think is a great starting point. Ball lightning, as you may know, has been this elusive phenomenon that's baffled scientists for centuries. It's often described as a luminous sphere of plasma, can move erratically, hover, and even pass through solid objects. Sound familiar?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Are you suggesting that these plasmoid drones might be some kind of advanced form of ball lightning?
Not necessarily advanced, but perhaps related. What's striking about the NASA paper is that it highlights the immense energy potential of ball lightning. One estimate suggests that a ball lightning event could carry enough to power a small town for a short period, or boil a tub of water if released rapidly. This energy potential aligns with some of the stranger effects reported with the drones.
That's wild. But hold on, the NASA paper is based on eyewitness. How reliable are those? People see weird stuff all the time.
You're right to be skeptical. The paper acknowledges the limitations of eyewitness testimony, the potential for misinterpretations, exaggeration, even hoaxes. But what's interesting is the consistency of certain observations across numerous reports spanning different time periods and geographic locations. This suggests that there's something real going on here, even if we don't fully understand it.
So are we saying ball lightning is basically a naturally occurring plasmoid? And if so, how do we jump from these naturally occurring things to controlled drones?
Let's add another layer to this. You also sent in a more recent paper from 2024 that discusses observations of plasmoid-like entities from NASA shuttle missions. These things were massive, some up to 1 kilometer in size, and were filmed moving in the thermosphere, which is over 200 miles above Earth.
A kilometer-sized ball of plasma floating around in space. Okay, you officially have my attention. What were these things doing up there? Just hanging out?
What's fascinating is that these plasmoids weren't just floating around passively. They were observed accelerating, changing direction, even engaging in what the researchers described as hunter-prey interactions.
Are you saying they were chasing each other? Space whales made of plasma. That is so cool.
The researchers were hesitant to assign intent to these plasmoid movements, but they did note the strikingly lifelike quality of their behavior. What's more, these plasmoids were observed descending from the thermosphere towards areas of intense electromagnetic activity on Earth, particularly thunderstorms.
So they're attracted to lightning.
Yeah.
That's interesting, especially considering these New Jersey sightings. New Jersey does have a pretty active coastline, right? Lots of thunderstorms rolling through.
Indeed. The paper suggests that plasmas may be drawn to electromagnetic radiation, essentially feeding on it.
Okay.
And where do you find some of the most concentrated sources of electromagnetic radiation on Earth? Large cities, power grids, industrial areas.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. We've got these naturally occurring plasmoids that are attracted to electromagnetic energy. And we have sightings of mysterious drones over a densely populated area with a major power grid.
Mm-hmm.
But that still doesn't explain how these things are being controlled,
Right.
if they are indeed being controlled.
Right, that's the million-dollar question. And to get closer to an answer, we need to dive into some of the research on the creation and potential control of plasmoids in laboratory settings.
All right, let's do it. Fire up those Bunsen burners.
No Bunsen burners needed, but we will need to unpack some pretty complex scientific concepts. You sent in 2 research papers,
Okay.
one from 1988 and another from 1992,
Uh-huh.
that delve into the theoretical and practical aspects of creating and controlling plasmoids.
Okay, I'm ready to get technical. Let's hear it.
The 1988 paper
Good.
focuses on something called a force-free plasmoid. This is a plasmoid where the magnetic fields and currents are arranged
Uh-huh.
in a way that they don't exert forces each other. Think of it like a perfectly balanced, self-contained whirlpool of energy.
Force-free. So it's not going to randomly explode. Good to know.
Yeah.
But how do they actually create these things in a lab?
The 1992 paper describes a method called the theta pinch.
Theta pitch.
It's a technique where they use a powerful magnetic field to compress and heat plasma, is essentially molding it into a plasmoid shape.
So it's like squeezing a lump of clay into a specific form.
Yeah, I like that.
But how do you keep this plasmoid stable? Wouldn't it just dissipate or fly apart?
That's where the concept of electron dynamics comes into play. Electrons,
Wow.
those tiny negatively charged particles, play a crucial role in maintaining the stability and longevity of plasmoids. Think of them as the glue that holds the whole thing together.
Okay, so we've got scientists creating these stable, force-free plasmoids in the lab. But how do you go from a lab experiment
Right.
to a drone zipping around New Jersey? That's a pretty big leap.
Indeed. But the 1992 paper hints at the possibility of manipulating plasmoid using electromagnetic fields. Essentially, you could guide a plasmoid by attracting or repelling it with carefully controlled magnetic fields.
So it's like playing a high-tech game of magnetic chess, moving these plasmoid pieces around with invisible forces. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But who's playing this game? Is it the government? Some rogue scientist? Or could it be something even more out there?
That's the heart of the mystery, isn't it? We've got these potential connections, naturally occurring plasmoids drawn to electromagnetic energy, and research showing that we can create and potentially control them in a lab, but bridging the gap between those two things, figuring out who or what might be behind these drones,
Right.
that's where things get really interesting.
You mentioned earlier that there was a big freak out when the FAA first started putting out warnings about these drones. What exactly were they saying?
The FAA's initial response was definitely alarmist.
Right.
They issued warnings about unidentified aerial phenomena posing potential safety risk aircraft. They were advising pilots to exercise extreme caution, and there were even hints that they might ground flight.
So they were taking it pretty seriously. No wonder people were freaking out.
Remember, this was all happening against a backdrop of heightened global tensions and increasing concerns about drone technology falling into the wrong hands. The public imagination was already primed for a story about mysterious, potentially hostile drones in our airspace.
It was like something out of a War of the Worlds scenario.
Exactly.
Except instead of Martian tripods, we had glowing orb of plasma.
Exactly. And then just when everyone's bracing for the worst, the White House drops this bombshell statement, seemingly contradicting everything the FAA had been saying.
It was like they were trying to calm everyone down. But they did it in such a vague way that it just raised more questions.
Yeah.
Do you think they were intentionally trying to be ambiguous?
It's certainly possible. Let's unpack the White House's statement a bit. They acknowledged the sightings of these unidentified aerial phenomena, but downplayed the threat. They suggested that these drones might pose no immediate danger and might even be part of a legitimate authorized program.
So on the one hand, they're saying, don't worry, everything's fine. But on the other hand, they're not actually denying the existence of these drones, revealing what they might be. It's almost like they're saying, we know something you don't know, but we're not going to tell you.
It's a classic case of strategic ambiguity they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Multiple objectives simultaneously.
Right.
They want to reassure the public, but they also want to protect whatever program or technology might be behind these drones, and they're probably also trying to avoid a full-blown panic.
Okay, so we've got this information tug-of-war going on between the FAA and the White House. But what does it all mean? Are these plasmoid drones something we should be worried about or not?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in. We need to consider all the possibilities, weigh the evidence, and try to make sense of the seemingly contradictory information we're being given.
All right, so let's put on our detective hats and start piecing this puzzle together. What are some of the scenarios we should be considering?
One possibility is that the FAA simply overreacted. Faced with these reports of strange aerial objects, they may have jumped to the worst-case scenario, assuming a hostile or unknown threat.
So they hit the panic button, alerted everyone,
Right.
and then after further investigation, they realized that these drones weren't actually a threat.
Precisely. Perhaps they consulted with other government agencies, maybe even the very programs responsible for these drones, and got the all clear. But by then, the cat was out of the bag, so to speak. The public was already spooked, and the White House had to step in to do damage control.
That would explain the vague statement, wouldn't it? They couldn't come right out and say, oops, our bad, it's just some top secret project, because that would reveal too much.
Exactly. They had to walk a fine line between calming the public and maintaining secrecy.
Okay, so that's one scenario, a bureaucratic snafu where the FAA overreacted. But what about the possibility that these drones are indeed part of some clandestine government program?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen those movies where the government is experimenting with all sorts of crazy technology that the public doesn't know about.
It's certainly a possibility, and it would fit with the pattern of strategic ambiguity. We're saying, think about it. If the government was developing and testing advanced plasmoid drones, they would have a vested interest in keeping it under wraps.
Right. It could be some next-level defense technology, something that could give them a strategic advantage.
Right.
And if that's the case, it makes sense that they wouldn't want to tip their hand by revealing too much.
Precisely. They might even be using this whole situation as a kind of controlled leak testing public reaction to the idea of plasmoid drones while simultaneously gauging their own technology.
Okay, so we've got the overreacting FAA scenario and the secret government program scenario. But what about those lifelike plasmoids we talked earlier, the ones observed in space?
Right.
Could they somehow be involved?
Yeah.
Is it possible that these New Jersey drones aren't human-made at all, but are actually some form of extraterrestrial intelligence?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting and a bit more speculative, but it's a possibility we shouldn't dismiss out of hand, remember?
Right.
The researchers who observed those space plasmoids were struck by their seemingly intelligent behavior. They were accelerating, changing direction, even interacting with each other in ways that suggested a level of awareness.
But what if these space plasmoids are drawn to Earth's electromagnetic energy, just like the paper suggested? And what if they're not just passively feeding on it, but are actually interacting with our technology, maybe even trying to communicate with us?
It's a tantalizing thought, isn't it? Imagine a scenario where those New Jersey drones are actually extraterrestrial probes studying our civilization, perhaps even trying to make contact. It would certainly explain the FAA's initial alarm and the White House's subsequent attempts to downplay the situation.
But even if these drones aren't alien visitors, the possibility that they're human-made, controlled plasmoids is still mind-blowing.
Right.
It means that technology has advanced far beyond what we thought possible.
Absolutely. It suggests that we're on the cusp of a technological revolution, one that could have profound implications for everything from energy production to transportation to warfare.
So what's the next step? How do we get to the bottom of this mystery?
What we can do is keep asking questions, keep digging for information, and keep challenging the official narratives.
Right. We need more transparency from the government, more research from scientists, and more critical thinking from all of us.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, if we keep pushing, we'll eventually uncover the truth about these plasmoid drones.
And who knows, that truth might be even more incredible than anything we can imagine right now.
Okay, so we've explored a bunch of possibilities. The FAA freaks out, the White House plays it cool, and somewhere in between, we've got these potentially game-changing plasmoid drones zipping around. It's like we're living in a real-life science fiction thriller.
And that's what makes this whole story so captivating, isn't it?
Right.
It's a blend of cutting-edge science, government secrecy, and the sheer awe-inspiring potential of plasmoid technology. It really makes you question what we know about the world and the possibilities that might be just beyond our current understanding.
Exactly. We've gone from discussing ball lightning to space plasmoid to top secret government programs, and even touched on the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. It's been a wild ride. But after all this, I'm still left with this nagging question. Were these plasmoid drones buzzing around New Jersey FAA approved all along?
Well, let's go back to the White House's statement. They said these drones might even be part of a legitimate, authorized program.
Right.
That's pretty carefully worded, isn't it? They're not explicitly confirming that these drones are part of a government program, but they're also not denying it. They're leaving it open to interpretation.
So you're saying they're playing coy?
Yeah.
Keeping their cards close to their chest?
Precisely. They're maintaining a level of strategic ambiguity that allows them to achieve multiple objectives. They can calm public fears without revealing sensitive information about their technological capabilities. It's a classic case of we can neither confirm nor deny.
All right, but let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that these plasmoid drones are indeed part of a government program. What would be the purpose of such a program? What could these drones be used for?
Well, considering the unique properties of plasmoids, the potential applications are vast.
Right.
And frankly, mind-boggling. Their ability to move at incredible speeds, their energy potential, their potential for stealth, all of these factors make them incredibly appealing for a variety of purposes.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are some specific examples?
For starters, imagine plasmoid drones used for surveillance. Their speed and maneuverability would make them ideal for reconnaissance missions, gathering intelligence in a way that traditional aircraft simply couldn't match. And because they're made of plasma, they could potentially be nearly invisible to radar, making them incredibly difficult to detect.
That's a pretty scary thought. Imagine these things spying on us from the sky, and we wouldn't even know it.
The potential for misuse, definitely there, but let's not forget the positive applications. Imagine these drones being used for search and rescue operations in disaster areas. They could navigate through hazardous environments, reach survivors quickly, even potentially deliver supplies or medical equipment.
Okay, that's a much more hopeful scenario. So we've got surveillance, search and rescue. What else?
Well, given their energy potential, plasmoid drones could revolutionize the energy sector. Imagine using them to transmit power wirelessly, eliminating the need for traditional power lines and grids.
Right.
Or think about the potential for fusion energy research. Plasmoids are essentially controlled balls of superheated plasma, which is the same stuff that powers the sun. If we can harness that energy here on Earth, it could solve our energy problems for generations to come.
So these plasmoid drones could be the key to a clean energy future.
Possibly, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. But I also can't help but think about the potential military applications. Could these things be weaponized?
It's certainly a possibility that can't be ignored. Imagine a weapon that could deliver a concentrated blast of plasma energy with pinpoint accuracy. It would be a game changer in warfare, potentially even more disruptive than the invention of gunpowder.
That's both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. It's like we're standing on the edge of a new technological era.
Yeah.
One that holds both immense promise and potential peril.
And that's the challenge we face, isn't it? As we unlock the secrets of plasmoid technology, we need to be mindful of both its potential benefits and its potential danger. We need to have open and honest conversations about the ethical implications, the potential for misuse, and the need for responsible development and regulation.
You're absolutely right. This isn't just a scientific or technological issue. It's a societal issue.
Right.
We need to be informed, engaged, and proactive in shaping the future of this. Because if these plasmoid drones are indeed the real deal, they could change the world as we know it.
And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from our deep dive today. We've explored the science, the mystery, the possibilities, and the potential consequences. But ultimately, it's up to us as a society to decide how we want to navigate new frontier.
Well said. So for all of you deep divers out there, keep your eyes on the skies, stay curious, and keep asking questions. Because the truth, whatever it may be, is out there. And maybe, just maybe, with enough curiosity and critical thinking, we can uncover it together. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more mind-blowing deep dives. Until next time, keep exploring.